The moment the lawyer pressed the remote, my uncle's smug grin vanished. Nobody had expected a video. Nobody had expected my grandmother to speak to us one last time. And absolutely, nobody expected her first sentence. If you're watching this, then you've already discovered that I left my entire estate to Margaret. Before any of you accuse her of manipulating me, I want you to know that I've spent the last 2 years recording everything. The room froze. My mother looked at Margaret, the quiet caregiver who had spent years looking after Grandma, and hissed, "What recordings?" Grandma smiled at the camera. "Oh, don't worry, you're all in them." I had never seen panic spread across so many faces so quickly. The funny thing was, I wasn't shocked. I was the only person in that room who actually knew the kind of woman my grandmother was. She never did anything without a reason. My name is Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, my family believed blood was everything. At least that's what they said. What they actually believed was that money was everything. Family only mattered when there was something to inherit. I learned that lesson early. My older sister Vanessa was the favorite child from the day she was born. She could do no wrong. If she failed an exam, the teacher was unfair. If she quit another job, her boss was toxic. If she maxed out another credit card, life had simply been cruel to her. Every mistake she made somehow became everyone else's responsibility. Especially mine. I was the opposite. I studied hard, earned scholarships, worked through college, and eventually became a software engineer. I bought my own house before I turned 35, paid off my student loans, and never asked my parents for $1. Instead of being proud, they always compared me to Vanessa. "Your sister needs more support," Mom would say. "You're strong enough to manage on your own," Dad added every single time. Strong enough? Dependable? Responsible? Those words sounded like compliments until I realized they were excuses to keep giving everything to someone else. When Grandpa passed away, Grandma Ileana refused to leave the home she had shared with him for almost 50 years. "I've still got 2 legs, she joked. Mom wasn't amused. "You shouldn't live alone." Grandma smiled. "Then visit me." That conversation ended quickly because everyone knew the truth. Nobody wanted to visit. They wanted control. At first, Grandma managed just fine. Then arthritis made everyday life harder. She struggled with cooking. Her eyesight weakened. Her balance wasn't what it used to be. Her doctor suggested hiring a caregiver. My mother immediately objected. "Strangers can't be trusted." Grandma asked calmly, "How many days were you here last month?" Mom hesitated. "I've been busy." Exactly. A week later, Margaret started working for Grandma. She wasn't flashy. She didn't talk much. She simply worked. She cooked healthy meals, organized medications, cleaned the house, drove Grandma to appointments, and somehow convinced her to laugh again. I visited every Sunday after work. Sometimes I'd fix something around the house. Sometimes we'd drink tea together. Sometimes we'd spend hours talking about Grandpa and listening to old records. Margaret usually joined us after finishing chores. She never interrupted. She simply listened. Grandma adored her. The rest of my family hated her almost immediately. Not because Margaret had done anything wrong. Because Grandma smiled more whenever Margaret was around. During one family dinner, my Uncle Robert whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Funny how caregivers always become part of the family right before rich old people die. Vanessa laughed. "I've seen enough movies to know where this is going." Dad chuckled. Mom didn't defend Margaret. She simply smiled. Margaret quietly continued serving dinner as if she hadn't heard any of it. After everyone left, I found her washing dishes. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked confused. "For what?" "My family." She smiled gently. "They're afraid. They're greedy. Sometimes those are the same thing." Grandma overheard us and laughed. "They'll find out soon enough." I asked what she meant. She simply winked. "You will see." Months passed. Grandma became weaker physically, but her mind stayed as sharp as ever. One afternoon she called me. Ethan, can you install security cameras? Outside? No. Inside? She nodded. Living room, kitchen, hallway, my office. I frowned. Did something happen? No. Then why? She leaned closer. I want the truth preserved. That answer made no sense. Still, I installed everything. High-definition cameras. Crystal clear microphones. Automatic cloud backup. Motion detection. I even showed Grandma how to replay videos. She learned surprisingly fast. Margaret seemed curious. Elena, are you worried someone might break in? Grandma smiled. No. She looked toward the front door. I'm worried about who already has a key. Neither of us understood. But Grandma looked completely satisfied. Around Christmas, the entire family suddenly rediscovered how much they loved visiting. Every weekend, someone appeared with flowers, chocolate, or fake smiles. My parents visited twice in 1 week. Vanessa started bringing expensive pastries she never paid for herself. Even Uncle Robert suddenly became interested in helping around the house. It would have been touching if every conversation hadn't ended the same way. So, Mom, have you updated your will? Grandma always ignored the question. One afternoon, Vanessa cornered Margaret in the kitchen while I was fixing a cabinet nearby. You've gotten awfully comfortable here. Margaret calmly replied, I'm here to work. Vanessa crossed her arms. Just remember your place. My place is wherever Elena needs me. Vanessa smirked. Don't get too attached. Margaret simply smiled. I already am. That answer seemed to irritate Vanessa even more. When she left, I apologized again. Margaret sighed. I've taken care of elderly people for 20 years. And the people who need the least care are usually the patients. About 6 months before Grandma died, my parents invited me over for dinner. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked in. Mom was unusually cheerful. Dad kept smiling. Vanessa was actually being polite. That combination always meant someone wanted something from me. Halfway through dinner, Dad cleared his throat. We've been talking. I nodded cautiously. About Grandma. So, have I? Mom smiled. She needs someone living with her. I know. Dad leaned forward. You work from home. Sometimes. You should move into her house permanently. I put my fork down. I own my own house. You don't need such a big place. I worked 10 years to buy it. Mom reached across the table. Families make sacrifices. I laughed before I could stop myself. Really? Her smile disappeared. What does that mean? I've spent every Sunday helping Grandma. So? Where were all of you? Dad frowned. We're busy. So am I. Vanessa interrupted. I can't handle old people. I looked at her. Exactly. She blinked. What does that mean? It means somehow everyone else's excuses are acceptable, but I'm expected to give up my life because I'm responsible. Mom slammed her hand on the table. Don't you dare make this about you. I didn't. You always think you're the victim. I almost laughed. I bought my own house. Silence. I paid for my education. More silence. I visit Grandma every week. Dad folded his arms. So you're refusing to help? No. I'm refusing to be manipulated. Mom burst into tears instantly. I can't believe we raised someone this selfish. I stood. You didn't. They all stared at me. I raised myself. I walked out before anyone could answer. Instead of driving home, I went straight to Grandma's house. She already knew. They asked you to move in. I blinked. How? They asked me yesterday. What did you tell them? I told them I already had someone taking care of me. She smiled toward Margaret, who was reading in the living room. Then she looked back at me. Ethan. Yeah? Never let people confuse guilt with love. Those words stayed with me. 3 months later, Grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep. Margaret called me before she called anyone else. She was crying so hard, she could barely speak. I'm so sorry. I drove there immediately. She was sitting beside Grandma's bed holding her hand. Not because she was an employee, because she had lost someone she genuinely loved. The funeral was heartbreaking. At least it should have been. Instead, my relatives spent most of the reception whispering about property values, investment accounts, jewelry collections, and who deserved what. I overheard Uncle Robert telling Vanessa, that house alone is worth over $1 million. Mom whispered, your grandmother always intended to keep everything in the family. Dad nodded confidently. There won't be any surprises. I looked across the room. Margaret sat alone in the last row, quietly crying. Not one member of my family thanked her for spending 3 years caring for Grandma. Not one. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Monday. Everyone arrived wearing confident smiles. Vanessa had already started talking about renovating Grandma's house. Uncle Robert joked about finally buying the boat he'd always wanted. Mom even asked the lawyer how long it would take to transfer ownership. The lawyer simply adjusted his glasses. I think it's best we begin. He opened the envelope. The room became silent. I, Eleanor Whitmore, being of sound mind. Everything sounded normal until he reached one sentence. I leave my residence, investments, savings, personal property, and the remainder of my estate, totaling approximately $2,300,000, to my caregiver, Margaret Collins. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the room exploded. What? That's impossible. She manipulated her. She's a thief. Margaret looked completely stunned. I didn't know. Before anyone could say another word, the lawyer raised his hand. Mrs. Whitmore anticipated these reactions. He reached beneath the table and placed a small remote on top. She instructed me to play this video immediately after reading the will. He pressed the button. The television came to life. Grandma appeared on the screen. She smiled directly into the camera. Then she said the words that changed every single life in that room. If you're watching this, then you've already proven exactly why none of you inherited a single penny. Now, let's watch what you all said when you thought I wasn't listening. The television screen faded from black, and my grandmother's warm smile filled the room. She looked exactly as I remembered her, calm, composed, and somehow still in complete control. If you're seeing this, she said, then my family has already done exactly what I expected. Instead of mourning me, you've started arguing over my money. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. Grandma continued. I know some of you are already thinking Margaret manipulated me. She didn't. In fact, for 2 years, she begged me to divide my estate between the family. Every single time, I refused. Margaret covered her mouth with both hands. I never wanted this, she whispered. The lawyer nodded. I know. Grandma smiled at the camera. But I also knew none of you would believe me. That's why I asked Ethan to install security cameras throughout my home. They weren't there because I was afraid of strangers. She paused. They were there because I was afraid of family. The lawyer pressed another button. A date appeared on the screen. 8 months before Grandma passed away. The video showed my parents sitting in Grandma's living room while Margaret was grocery shopping. Grandma had stepped outside to water her flowers. Mom looked around before whispering, Do you think she remembers where the safe combination is? Dad shrugged. If she doesn't, we'll find the paperwork after she dies. Uncle Robert laughed. As long as she changes that ridiculous will. Mom smirked. If she doesn't, we'll challenge it. Old people can be declared mentally incompetent. The two inked so meditating, we were sitting in, became painfully quiet. Mom's face drained of color. That was taken out of context. Nobody answered. Another clip began. This one showed Vanessa walking into Grandma's bedroom while Margaret was helping with laundry. Vanessa opened drawers one by one. She picked up Grandma's jewelry box. This necklace is definitely mine. She slipped it into her purse. Seconds later, Margaret entered. Vanessa? Vanessa froze. Margaret looked at the necklace. I think Eleanor would rather you ask first. Vanessa rolled her eyes and threw it back onto the dresser. I was just looking. No, Margaret replied softly. You were taking. Vanessa stormed out. Grandma's voice interrupted the video. Margaret never told me about that. I only found out because of the cameras. Vanessa buried her face in her hands. Grandma. The next recording started. It was one I remembered. Christmas dinner. Only this time we were seeing everything from the camera in the dining room. After Grandma excused herself to take medication, Uncle Robert leaned toward Dad. We should convince her to sell the house now. Dad nodded. If Ethan moves in, it'll be easier to keep an eye on things. Mom smiled. He'll do whatever guilt tells him. Vanessa laughed. He's always been easy to manipulate. My stomach twisted. I'd never known they spoke about me that way. Grandma's voice returned. My dear Ethan. Everyone looked at me. If you're watching this, I want you to know something. She smiled. You were never difficult. You were never selfish. You were the only one who came because you loved me instead of my bank account. I felt tears burning my eyes. Grandma continued. You fixed broken doors, changed light bulbs, cleaned gutters, drove me to appointments, and never once asked for anything. She laughed softly. You even argued with me when I tried to pay you. I smiled through the tears. I remember. The next video appeared. This one changed everything. It was recorded only 4 months before Grandma died. Mom, Dad, Uncle Robert, and Vanessa were gathered in the kitchen. They thought Grandma was asleep upstairs. Mom spoke first. We need Margaret gone. Dad nodded. The longer she stays here, the stronger her influence becomes. Vanessa smiled. I've got an idea. She pulled a small prescription bottle from her purse. We tell Grandma Margaret forgot her medication. Mom frowned. That might not be enough. Vanessa leaned closer. Then we tell everyone Margaret has been stealing. Silence. Dad finally nodded. People always believe bad news. The lawyer immediately paused the video. Every person in the room stared at Vanessa. She looked like she might faint. I never actually did it. Margaret whispered, You accused me. Vanessa couldn't answer. Margaret looked toward the lawyer. I almost lost my nursing certification because of that accusation. The lawyer quietly nodded. Eleanor documented everything. Then Grandma's video resumed. They filed a complaint against Margaret. The screen changed again. This time, it showed Margaret sitting across from investigators. She calmly answered every question. Then the camera switched to another recording. Grandma herself was presenting the security footage, proving Margaret had done nothing wrong. The complaint had been dismissed immediately. Grandma looked directly into the camera again. They wanted to destroy the one person who truly cared about me. Nobody dared look at Margaret. I noticed Uncle Robert wiping sweat from his forehead. He probably thought the worst was over. He was wrong. Grandma smiled. Robert? He immediately looked up. Summary any party kichu anchandrastrich. His eyes widened. The lawyer opened another folder. There is additional documentation. Grandma continued. 5 years ago, Robert borrowed $200,000 from me to save his business. Robert interrupted the screen. I paid it back. Grandma smiled sadly. No, dear. The lawyer held up signed papers. You forged my signature. Robert stood up. That's ridiculous. The lawyer calmly slid a forensic handwriting report across the table. I had it examined after Eleanor requested it. Robert's knees gave out. He dropped back into his chair. Grandma wasn't finished. She looked straight into the camera. Robert, I forgave you. He started crying. But forgiveness isn't permission to lie. The room had become completely silent. Then came the recording that nobody expected. Not even me. Grandma smiled. Here's one more thing. She reached beside her chair and picked up a folder. Ethan. My heart skipped. When your grandfather passed away, he left a handwritten letter. I frowned. What letter? I kept it because I knew your parents would never show it to you. The lawyer handed me a sealed envelope. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was Grandpa's handwriting. Ethan, if you're reading this, your grandmother finally decided it was time. You've always reminded me of myself. Quite hardworking. Honest. I know your parents have spent years making you believe you're second best. Don't believe them. People who chase applause rarely earn respect. People who quietly build their lives usually earn both. I wanted part of my estate to help you start your future. Unfortunately, I became too sick to update certain paperwork before I died. Your grandmother knows my wishes. Trust her. Love always. Grandpa. I couldn't read another word. My vision blurred. Grandma appeared on the screen again. Ethan, I couldn't change your grandfather's will after he passed. She smiled gently. But I could honor his heart. Then she looked toward Margaret. Margaret. Margaret was crying openly now. You gave up promotions, vacations, holidays with your own family, and thousands of hours of your life so I wouldn't spend my final years alone. She paused. You were never my employee. You became my daughter. Margaret completely broke down. I loved you, she whispered to the screen. I know, Grandma answered with a smile that somehow felt alive despite the recording. And that's exactly why I trusted you. She folded her hands. My estate belongs to Margaret because she earned my trust. Then she looked directly into the camera one last time. As for the rest of you, the smile disappeared. If any of you truly loved me, you would have left this office today remembering me instead of counting my money. The video ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For nearly a full minute, the room remained frozen. Finally, my mother stood. Her mascara had run down her cheeks. She looked at Margaret. I'm sorry. Margaret quietly shook her head. No. Mom blinked. I mean it. I know you mean it now. Margaret picked up her purse. But the apology you owed me was 3 years too late. She turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped beside me. She gently squeezed my shoulder. Eleanor was right about you. Then she smiled through her tears. You were always her greatest pride. I watched her leave with the inheritance my family had spent years believing belonged to them. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like anyone had stolen something from us. I felt like justice had finally found the right address.